The John Brown's Revenge and her crew had been waiting for a week at this point. The ship had landed on an asteroid because, while it wouldn't have evaded the advanced sensors of a military vessel, it was fine for hiding from freighters. This was a major interstellar shipping route, and they had seen 1,000 ships pass in front of them in the week they had been waiting. But the John Brown's Revenge and her crew weren't planning on picking off any cargo vessel, no matter the value. They had a more specific kind of prey they were after. They spotted it on the 8th day. The captain, Mary O'Connor, shouted the order for the 40-man crew to immediately prepare for battle. The first mate and the captain's husband, Michael O'Connor, was in the armory within a minute with 10 other men and women already getting their gear on. They had a full week of nothing to do but check their gear, so the only last-minute gear check was the ship's witch's Clara had to make sure the boarding party's shielding amulets were still fully charged. The boarders would carry either a shotgun or a submachine gun, a large caliber handgun holstered on their thigh, and a cutlass strapped to their backs. They wore little in the way of armor, other than a shielding amulet, so their clothing was simple: a jacket, a heavy shirt, jeans, combat boots, and a wide-brimmed hat. Stuart Confederacy convoy that had been spotted was made up of 8 different ships, and the John Brown's Revenge and her crew knew they couldn't take them all. They were not operating a pirate fleet, so like any predator knows, they had to isolate one of the freighters from the group, then move in for the kill. It was simple, really. The John Brown's Revenge fired its mag cannon first at the engines of the rear Stukic freighter, immobilizing it. The second shot was from the much smaller chase cannons and simply punched a hole in the hull of the ship in the lead. They didn't want to destroy the first ship outright. They wanted the convoy to know their only option was to flee to safety and leave the rear freighter to its fate. Which is exactly what the convoy did. The lead ship's crew knew they had to get somewhere fast so they could safely patch the hole in the hull. The John Brown's Revenge pulled up alongside the remaining freighter. The right side of the John Brown's Revenge had multiple launch ports with boarding pods. The boarding party divided into 2 fire teams, and each fire team went into a separate pod, and then the pods were launched into the hull of the enemy freighter. They stuck right to the hull of the enemy vessel, forming a vacuum seal, and then the machinery on the front of each pod cut a breaching hole into the hull of the enemy freighter. The fight the freighter's crew was able to put up was pathetic, and in minutes every crew member who drew arms against the boarders was dead, in a puddle of gore from blast from a shotgun or burst from a submachine gun. The captain of the vessel and his officers surrendered easily, though if they knew what was going to happen to them, they probably wouldn't have. The John Brown's Revenge sent a shuttle to ferry the cargo back to the John Brown's Revenge, but that the plunder was only one of the 2 reasons for taking this vessel. The other reason was that the Stukic Confederacy heavily relied on slave labor, and there were even 5 slaves working in the galley of the freighter. The boarding party freed them and put them on the shuttle back to the John Brown's Revenge. They would be clothed, given food, medical care, and a share of the plunder, so they had some money to start anew. The remaining crewmen of the freighter would not be so lucky. The still living crew of the freighter were tied up and forced to kneel, and Captain Mary O'Connor drew a cutlass and hacked the head off of the freighter's captain in front of them, then dismembered the body. The boarding party then in turn did the same to each officer and crewman, one by bloody one, while they could only watch as they awaited their turn to die. The shuttle ferried the plunder, boarders, and now freed slaves back to the John Brown's Revenge, and as soon as the shuttle docked, the John Brown's Revenge was speeding away from the scene of the massacre to the port of New Boston, the heart of the Terran system's largest abolitionist movement. While it might be obvious to American readers of this story what this was inspired by, I know many non-Americans won't know the inspiration behind this story, so I will talk a little about it. In the years leading up to the American Civil War, members of the abolition movement often resorted to violence. The most well-known of that is a man named John Brown. In a very well-known incident of May, in 1856, John Brown and his guerrilla forces dragged several well-known pro-slavery settlers out of their homes, the youngest of these being the 16-year-old son of one of the settlers, and killed them by one of 2 methods. Some of the slavery supporters were shot, but John Brown wanted to send a message. So in 1856, when the weapons of war were cap and ball revolvers, muzzle-loading mini-rifles, and the very famous Sharps rifles that were sent to Brown by the abolitionist Reverend Henry Ward Beecher, termed Breacher's Bibles, John Brown wanted to make one of the killings especially memorable, so he hacked a man to death with a fucking genuine broadsword. 3 years later, in 1859, John Brown would be hung for treason after attacking Harper's Ferry, Virginia with 14 free slaves in an effort to start a full slave rebellion. In an especially ironic turn of events, the man who led the US Marines that defeated John Brown at Harper's Ferry was none other than the infamous Colonel Robert E. Lee, who only 2 years later would himself commit a far more grievous act of treason when he led the Confederate Army against the Union, while John Brown was considered by many people in the Union Army to be nothing short of the American hero that he is.